Hi there, Ischa here, and welcome to The Higher Life, where I explore concepts that are considered esoteric, spiritual, psychological, and new age, and unpack how you can extract the wisdom of these to lead a truly empowered life. That is, to understand, access, and develop your personal power in a way that you can really transform our world for the better. And we all know that right now, this kind of skill set is vital to restoring the well-being of our planet. In today's episode, I want to talk about the difference between ideals and truth. Or more to the point, how once we have met with the disappointment of ideals or living in an idealistic way, we're more inclined to invite in a deeper journey into our truth or into truth itself. So what I'm really saying is that we don't really start to seek out the truth in our lives until we've been sufficiently disappointed by our ideals. And I say this, I'm using the word I because it's something that I have felt very deeply in my own life. And also I think it's out there on the world stage. And anybody who's interested in the spiritual path will have come across the teaching that whatever is happening externally is a reflection of what's happening internally. But I think we need to dive into this a little bit just to give it context. This may not necessarily mean that whatever's happening out there externally on the world stage is speaking to some very deeply personal internal conflict you might be having within yourself or in your own life. I think what it speaks to is how the outer stage is reflecting what phase humanity is in its own journey towards truth. And as an individual human being, how you start to seek out truth is by entering into a journey of personal transformation. As you come to ask yourself really big questions about your existence here on the planet. You know, who am I? What am I here for? And how does life really work? And when you start asking these questions, you start to enter into a kind of self-exploration in which you understand that the self that you think you are is in fact not all of who you are. It's simply a material or ego manifestation which has been culturally curated. And I've talked about that a lot in past episodes, but what I want to dive into here is that the ego self, which is culturally and socially conditioned, and it is regenerated through generations of human beings teaching their children or passing down to their children a lot of the beliefs that they themselves were exposed to without really challenging them. And we do that because we have this natural tendency as human beings to be idealistic. And we can see that, we have ideals, we have ideas about what it means to be a human being, what a good life looks like, what is right and wrong, what is just and unjust. And we have created this whole reality based on these ideals. Now, these ideals historically, and I think if we continue to operate in this kind of idealistic way, we will continually meet disappointment. The truth is that ideals are an idea, but when you put them into practice, they often don't live up to the dream. And it brings you into a state which is called the disappointed dream, something that I worked with a lot as a transpersonal coach, and especially within couples and families and teams. This idea that we can come together, we can create something amazing, we can transcend the past and all the trauma, by becoming more idealistic and creating tribes and nations and cultures that are built off these ideals. Now, you may sense where I'm going with this. One of the nations that stands out at the moment that has really sought to build itself off ideals is the USA, America. And I would say this is one of the nations that at the moment humanity feels extremely disappointed in. There is this sense that it didn't live up to the ideals. It hasn't lived up to the expectations. And we love to project onto the United States, onto the leadership of the states, onto the people, about their failure or the failure to live up to this beautiful set of ideals, really, if you travel back. But what we failed to really explore is that those nations, wherever we are in the world, I was raised in Australia, a lot of these new countries that were built on some sort of vision for a better future, were also built off a very traumatic past. That is, when they were, invaded or discovered or explored, and this idea came up that they could use this territory to actually build a different type of experience for human beings, there was kind of a complete override about the kind of soul-destroying, ways that occurred. Now, maybe it was, for the people of the time, the idea was that they were going to be building a better space for humanity, but at the same time they were crushing a version of humanity with very little positive regard to the beauty that particular arrangement may have brought into the world, such as tribal humans. So, we really see out in the world on the external stage a humanity coming face to face with this massive disappointment, the fact that we cannot live up to our ideals. Now, I spoke to you earlier about, this is something that's been deeply personal, and I think it's something that triggered my own pathway into personal transformation and empowerment. In my own psyche, I also was following my ideals out of a highly dysfunctional family experience growing up, with this notion that somehow when I grow up and fall in love and have a family, I'm going to do better. I had this very idealistic mindset about it. All it would take is for me to show enough love, to be caring enough, to be present enough, to be available enough, that I would be able to do things differently. And, it hasn't really panned out that way. I mean, not entirely. The thing is, I haven't been able to create that perfect family that could somehow compensate for the emotional and spiritual neglect that I experienced in my own. And that's healthy, because if I was able to do that, I would become dependent on this perfect family for my happiness and my well-being. So what I have managed to do is to face up to a lot of the dysfunctions that I inherited, the family system that I was raised in inherited, the cultural context that my family has been born out of over generations, and also, the kind of conditions that are happening in these current times as a modern woman growing up in a new country with lots of ideals about what I should be doing with my life. This is I was very idealistic, and I'm also naturally an idealistic person. So I do resonate and really sympathize and empathize with this struggle that humanity is in at the moment, to recognize that its ideals are in fact the problem. It is not the enemies out there. It is our over-attachment to our beliefs and to our idealistic tendencies that have us caught in this delusion that if we just work hard enough, if we hold true to our values, to our beliefs, to our dogma, and that we know that we are right and others are wrong, we will somehow be able to create this utopia that humanity can thrive in. And it really takes a lot of pain and suffering for us to wake up to this delusion. And we see that happening out on the world stage. That happened also in my own life when I had to come face to face with my delusions about what marriage, what motherhood, what being a woman in the modern world, what my coaching practice could bring me. And it's been a very dark and lonely place at times, and I've suffered multiple burnouts. But what I keep coming back to is, well, this is clearly not the truth. This is somehow delusional, and it's always guiding me back into this core aspiration that I have to live as truth, to understand the truth of what it means to be human. Who am I? What am I here for? And how does life really work? And I've channeled that into the Higher Life Academy, which is really about, it's a soul school. It's really helping us understand that we are born into a human experience with all the trauma and outdated wounding of the past, and all the talents and gifts and experiences of the past. And somehow we are playing our part in this generation, in a generation of a family legacy, to really move closer and closer to the truth. Now, I may be the person who does eventually live as truth, or it may just be an advancement I make for my children, and one of my children or their children might be the one who fully experiences that enlightenment. Now, one thing I can say is, even though I may have been misguided in pursuing my ideals, and maybe we all want to criticize the West specifically for its failure to live up to the kind of ideals and values that it proposed or was built off. But what we must also look at, in all fairness, is some of the amazing evolutions that have happened in this process. Some of the darkness that has been revealed that may not have been revealed if we were not able to form new nations and new lands where people could come together from different tribes, from different experiences, and learn more about what we actually share. A lot of the psychological, sexual, physical abuse, the violence, the unfair conditions, the maybe more unfair tribal conditions in which not every person in the tribe was thriving, these things have been brought out into the light. We no longer tolerate the same kind of human abuses that we used to. Yes, we perpetuate some of them still, because we are strongly defined by our beliefs. It's very difficult to go to a group of people who are very strongly aligned with their religious or cultural identity and say, you might need to let that go. You might need to stop fighting your enemy and start seeing what you share. That is big. People feel terrified to give up that identity, because fighting for what you believe in gives you energy. It makes your life have purpose, but it also perpetuates human suffering. That is why this core message that I bring through the work about personal transformation is the most effective way to global peace and prosperity. It's because you have to face up to that delusion around being idealistic, operating out of an ego self that really pursues its ideals, its beliefs, that is highly culturally curated, which means what you believe to be true and right and wrong is really a product of the culture you were born into and has nothing to do with truth. The same way we need to explore that while science brings us closer to truth, it can never give us the whole truth, because it's always blinded by the human mindset. It's always blinded by the agenda in which the scientist enters into the work. We can't escape that. But what we can trust in is that every step that we take towards pursuing our ideals and being disappointed by them, if we can actually meet that disappointment with a wisdom, we will actually learn through that and get closer to the truth. If we hit this idealism and all we can do is feel despair and blame and criticize and judge ourselves or others, we don't really have the opportunity to move to that higher level of consciousness. So this is a really important lesson, and it follows on from the last two. I talked about what's the difference between values and beliefs 2 lessons ago. I talked about how personal transformation is the pathway to global peace and prosperity, and that we really need to see personal transformation as becoming much more attuned to how our ego self works in the world and how it is created by the cultural conditions that we are born into, and that in fact we have a much deeper, more sustainable personal power that comes through spirit. And spirit is not working against ego, not at all. It's just that the ego keeps the spirit very contained in a way of behaving in the world that just perpetuates the old way and doesn't allow for this evolution to be fully manifested. Put practically, right now what we're seeing on the world stage is humanity meeting the delusion of ideals. And even though we've gone about and tried to create all these utopic nations and we were so excited about its potential, it has failed in many ways. So it's no use to blame ourselves or the nation, or to think that we must demonize the leaders of these nations. In fact, having very extreme leaders sometimes helps us see quickly the delusion that we are caught into. If you are somebody who truly wants to transform our world for the better, you want to live in an empowered way, and you want all of life to thrive, then personal empowerment, personal transformation is the only pathway that you can take that doesn't rely on beliefs, on ideals, on judgment. It's truly enriching without being coercing. And I think that's amazing. You know, if we look at the limitations of all political, spiritual, philosophical ideology, it's lovely to talk about it. It is great to feel inspired about it. But most of the time in practice, it just simply doesn't produce the results we're looking for. I believe that if every single human being were to undertake this journey of personal transformation, claim back their true personal power to live as kind, compassionate, wise, joyful, curious human beings, we would see a very fast, positive, radical transformation, you know, spreading across the globe. And everything that is happening now on the world stage is serving in that agenda, if we can just approach it in a friendly, fearless, and curious way. And that's exactly what we do here at The Higher Life. Every episode at Higher Life TV is really helping you to become more empowered, to see what's happening out there in the world as part of a larger intelligence, and to step up into your truth so that truth can become a virus that spreads, you know, and really enlightens, illuminates, and enlivens humanity. So if you like the sound of this, travel over to Higher Life Academy or subscribe at Higher Life TV. I'd love to have you on board and to join me in this momentum that is already taking place. So until next time, take care and love life.